So I think after that performance against Stephen Fulton, I think it's undeniable at this point in time that Inoue seems like the most dynamic, monstrous, frightening puncher in the lower weight classes. Now, the only person I've seen that's had this type of power is probably Prince Nassim. When Prince Nassim was in his prime and he was blowing through his weight class, obviously he was a lower weight fighter. He was probably a little bit bigger than Inoue, because he did manage to go up to featherweight, and we've never seen Inoue go up to featherweight. But the only fighter that I can think of that's had this type of power is Prince Nassim. But Prince Nassim was a fighter who was very unorthodox. He wasn't very technical in the sense that he wasn't a traditional fighter in terms of being textbook. Now, I'm not saying Inoue is 100% textbook. He's not. But if you compare him to Prince Nassim, he's a lot more textbook, and in a way I feel like that makes him more impressive than Prince Nassim. One of the reasons why Prince Nassim was such a great puncher was the fact that he was unorthodox. The punches used to come at angles that a lot of fighters didn't used to see coming. He used to switch into southpaw orthodox like several times in a fight, while Inoue is more of a traditional based fighter. But even though he's traditional, in the sense that his stance and everything is more textbook than Prince Nassim, he's still very concussive with his power. And I think because of this reason, I think he's probably one of the most frightening fighters to fight in the lower weight classes. The only fighter that I can see that used to have that level of terror was obviously I mentioned Prince Nassim, but that was me comparing the power in terms of the fear factor that Inoue presents. Like, you can see it in fighters, like before they go into the ring with him, they seem to capitulate under his power. The only fight that I've seen that really put it on him was Donaire, and Donaire is probably one of the most underrated fighters. Obviously he was always in the shadow of Pacquiao, but he was an underrated fighter in the sense that he never got as much credit as he deserved. But he was a legitimate 7-time world champion. Like, he was legit, but he never got as much credit. But like, that's the only fighter that I've seen that didn't capitulate under fear. Like, even Stephen Fulton, who was a bigger fighter than Inoue, when he went in there with him, like from the first round, when he felt his jab, when he felt his power, he legitimately just went into his shell. This is the bigger fighter with a longer reach and who's slightly taller, who's in the higher weight class. As soon as he goes in there with Inoue, he goes into his shell and he's apprehensive, and it's only in the 5th round he started to open up. But even then, he never got his footing in the fight because of the level of fear that Inoue had him in. I think with Inoue, when you face most punchers, they're generally not cultured in the sense that they're not sophisticated fighters with boxing skills. But Inoue is one of the most well-rounded fighters probably in the sport. Like, there's fighters that are very slick fighters who are very high pound for pound in my list, like Usyk. Usyk is a very good slick fighter, and he could do things that a lot of his contemporaries in the heavyweight division cannot do. But one thing I'll say about Usyk is, in terms of his power, he's not a concussive puncher. But here you got Inoue. Inoue is one of them fighters. Not only does he have the slick boxing skills, he's a fighter that honestly, like, not only does he have the slick boxing skills, but he's a fighter that has concussive power, and he is one of the most hardest punchers in the lower weight classes. So not only can he not, like, if you're usually going up against a puncher, you usually think in your head that I'm just gonna outbox this guy. So you cannot outbox him and you cannot outpunch him. So this is why I think Inoue is probably one of the most frightening, terrifying fighters in the heavyweight in the lower weight classes. Not only does he have the slick boxing skills, so you're probably not going to outbox him, but he also has the power to knock you out. I mean, he managed to knock out Stephen Fulton, and that punch came out of nowhere. So for this reason, I think he's a genuine boogeyman in the division. I mean, he's someone who's terrifying. I mean, his nickname, which is the Monster, is a legitimate nickname. I think it's a nickname that suits him quite well. Because he's a monster in there. He's one of the most terrifying fighters in the weight class. Legitimately one of the most terrifying fighters I've seen right now. Like, you got fighters like that were terrifying in their prime. Like, everyone remembers Golovkin and such. But there's very few fighters that are very well rounded in that aspect. Like, if you look at most fighters in history, like for example the George Foreman, the Sonny Listons, even Mike Tyson, they're to some extent they're one dimensional in the sense that they're just punching. Like, when the bell goes, they're just gonna come for you. You know what they're gonna do. But Inoue is one of them fighters. Not only does he have that fear factor because of his power, he's also very slick. So it's a very unique combination of that you're gonna face when you face Inoue, and I think that's what adds to his intimidation factor. Not only can he not outbox him, but he's going to outpunch you and probably hurt you. It's one thing going in the ring fighting someone who's a slick fighter, because for example, Floyd Mayweather's a slick fighter. I don't think in his prime fighters really feared him because they knew his power wasn't anything to really write home about, so you could just walk through his punches. But when you're going in there with a fighter who's slick, so not only do you have to deal with their boxing skills, but they've also got punching power and they're a genuine lethal puncher, it just adds another level of fear to the game. So I think Inoue is legitimately one of the most frightening fighters in the sport. Like he's legitimately, like, people talk about the Golovkins, the Kovalevs of the world back in the day, obviously Mike Tyson, Sonny Liston, but also Edwin Valero. But like, I'll be honest, I think Inoue, like, if he was to go into the ring, you're a smaller weight fighter and he's going to fight in Inoue, it's a frightening prospect. But tell me what you think below. Do you think there's a certain fear factor with fighting Inoue, or do you think I don't know what I'm talking about, and there's no fear factor, there's nothing to fear when you get into the ring with him? Like, he just doesn't have an intimidation factor. I think there is an intimidation factor. It's not as apparent as like a Mike Tyson or Sonny Liston, who used to have his glare and such, but there is an intimidation factor with Inoue because of his punching power, his elite boxing skills, the fact that, let's be real, at this point his reputation precedes him. A lot of people see him as the number one pound for pound fighter in the world. He's dominated 4 weight classes. He's unified in now his 4th weight class, and the weight class before then he was undisputed. I mean, there's a lot going on there, and I think the only time he's actually shown frailty was in the fight against Nonito Donaire. But even in the Nonito Donaire fight, Nonito Donaire, I think, broke his orbital bone and his nose, but that never stopped Inoue. Inoue showed plenty of heart and he performed well in that fight. So from that perspective, I think he is one of the most frightening fighters in the sport today. But tell me what you think below. Is he a frightening fighter, or is there nothing to fear? If he was a lower weight fighter, or you was managing a lower weight fighter, would you want to fight this guy? I mean, I think he's terrifying, but that's just my opinion. Tell me what you think below, and like and subscribe to the channel. I've got a lot more content coming your way. Peace.